what exactly is cancer? In our previous episodes, we traced cancer back thousands of years, from Egyptian papyri to Renaissance autopsies to the dawn of modern medicine, and also had a look into why DNA mutations can lead to disease. But here's the thing. For most of that history, we were essentially describing what cancer does without really understanding what cancer is. That changed in the year 2000, when two scientists published a paper that would revolutionize how we think about this disease. Their names were Douglas Hanahan and Robert Weinberg, and they asked a deceptively simple question that we may all have. What makes a cancer cell a cancer cell? The problem with defining cancer. Here's why that question is harder than it sounds. Cancer isn't just one disease, it's hundreds. Breast cancer behaves differently than lung cancer. Lung cancer behaves differently than leukemia. Even within breast cancer, there are multiple subtypes, each with its own personality, its own genetics, its own response to treatment. So how do you define, and more importantly, fight something that shapeshifts depending on where you look? For decades, we defined cancer by what we could see under a microscope. Cells that look weird, divide uncontrollably, and invade where they shouldn't. But that's like defining a car by saying, it has wheels and moves. True, but not exactly helpful if you want to understand how it works, or how to stop it. What Hanahan and Weinberg realized was this. Instead of focusing on what cancer cells look like, focus on what they can do. What abilities do cancer cells need to acquire to go from normal to malignant? Think of it like a heist movie. To pull off the perfect crime, you need to acquire specific skills. Crack the safe, disable the alarm, evade security, make the getaway. Cancer cells do the same thing. They need to acquire specific capabilities, or as Hanahan and Weinberg called them, hallmarks, to successfully become cancer. The original 6, that became 8. In their landmark 2000 paper in the journal Cell, Hanahan and Weinberg proposed 6 hallmarks of cancer. These were the fundamental capabilities that nearly every cancer, regardless of type, had to develop. 1. Sustaining proliferative signaling, or in plain English, constantly telling themselves to grow and divide even when no one's asking them to. Normal cells wait for growth signals from their neighbors, like needing permission to speak. Cancer cells hack this system, either by producing their own growth signals or by making themselves hypersensitive to the faintest whisper of grow. They essentially forge the permission slips. 2. Evading growth suppressors, ignoring the body's stop dividing signals. Your body has built-in brakes, genes like P53 and RB, that tell cells when to stop dividing. Cancer cells disable these brakes. It's like cutting the wires to your car's brake system. Nothing can slow you down anymore, even when you should stop. 3. Resisting cell death, refusing to die when they're supposed to. Normal cells have a self-destruct program called apoptosis. When cells get too damaged or too old, they're supposed to commit cellular suicide for the greater good. Cancer cells dismantle this program, becoming essentially immortal at the cellular level. They're the cells that refuse to leave the party. 4. Enabling replicative immortality, dividing forever instead of hitting the normal limit. Normal cells have a built-in division counter called telomeres, protective caps on chromosomes that shorten with each division. After about 50 to 70 divisions, cells hit the Hayflick limit and stop. Cancer cells reactivate an enzyme called telomerase that rebuilds these caps, resetting the counter to infinity. 5. Inducing angiogenesis, growing new blood vessels to feed themselves. Tumors can't grow bigger than a few millimeters without a blood supply. They'd starve. So cancer cells send out chemical signals that hijack nearby blood vessels, making them sprout new branches directly into the tumor. It's like ordering home delivery when you refuse to leave the house. And 6. Activating invasion and metastasis, breaking free and spreading to distant organs. This is what makes cancer truly deadly. Cancer cells break down the barriers that keep them in place, slip into the bloodstream or lymphatic system, travel to distant sites, and set up shop in new organs. It's an incredibly complex process that requires dozens of coordinated changes. 2 years later, they added 2 more foundational concepts: genome instability and mutation, the fuel that drives all the other changes, and tumor-promoting inflammation, the body's confused response that accidentally helps cancer grow. This framework was brilliant because it was both simple and universal. It didn't matter if you were studying colon cancer in a mouse or melanoma in a human. These hallmarks applied. But science doesn't stand still. The next evolution, 2011. By 2011, it was becoming clear that cancer was even more sophisticated than we thought. Hanahan and Weinberg published an update, adding 2 emerging hallmarks. Reprogramming energy metabolism. Cancer cells change how they produce energy, famously favoring a less efficient process called glycolysis, even when oxygen is available. It's called the Warburg effect, and we still don't fully understand why they do it. Evading immune destruction. Cancer cells develop elaborate disguises and defense mechanisms to hide from or fight off the immune system. They also introduced the concept of enabling characteristics, underlying features that support the hallmarks. These included the genomic instability we mentioned earlier and tumor-promoting inflammation. Notice something? The definition was expanding outward. It wasn't just about what happens inside the cancer cell anymore. It was about how cancer cells interact with their environment, with blood vessels, with immune cells, with the inflammatory response. Cancer was becoming less cellular and more ecological. The 2022 update: Cancer goes systemic. This past decade has brought an even more radical shift in our thinking, captured in Hanahan's 2022 update to the hallmarks framework. First, he elevated those 2 emerging hallmarks to full status, because by now, there's nothing emerging about them. They're fundamental. But then came the additions that really expanded our view, unlocking phenotypic plasticity, cancer cells' ability to change their identity, to shapeshift between different cellular states. This helps explain why cancers can become resistant to therapy. They literally transform into something the treatment doesn't affect in the same way. Senescent cells. Old, supposedly retired cells that don't divide but won't die either. Turns out, they stick around and create an inflammatory environment that can promote cancer. Polymorphic microbiomes. The communities of bacteria and other microorganisms living in and around tumors, which can influence everything from cancer growth to treatment response. And perhaps most striking, the recognition that cancer affects not just the tumor site, but creates systemic changes throughout the entire body, reprogramming metabolism, modifying the nervous system, even changing how distant organs function. Think about what this means. We've gone from viewing cancer as a local problem, mutated cells in one spot, to understanding it as a systemic disease that reorganizes entire body systems. We've moved from inside the cell to the tumor microenvironment to the whole organism. Why this matters? Here's the beautiful thing about this framework. It's not just academic. Each hallmark represents both a potential target for therapy and a window into understanding the whole person living with cancer. Can't stop cancer from dividing? Target the first hallmark with specific drugs. Can't kill cancer cells with traditional chemo? Target the 5th hallmark. Cancer hiding from the immune system? Target hallmark number 10. That's the entire premise of immunotherapy, one of the most exciting advances in cancer treatment. But here's what's equally important. Understanding these hallmarks helps us approach cancer holistically. When we recognize that cancer reprograms metabolism throughout the entire body, we can think about nutritional support differently. When we understand that chronic inflammation promotes cancer, we can address lifestyle factors that reduce inflammation. When we see that the microbiome influences treatment response, we can consider how to support healthy microbial communities. When we acknowledge that cancer affects the nervous system and creates systemic changes, we can better address fatigue, pain, and the constellation of symptoms that affect quality of life. The hallmarks don't just show us where to aim our drugs, they show us how to support the whole human being navigating this disease. They remind us that treating cancer isn't just about destroying malignant cells. It's about understanding and supporting the entire organism those cells exist within. This is medicine moving from reductionist to integrative, from cellular to systemic, from treating cancer to treating people with cancer. What's next? Over this series, we're going to dive deep into each of these hallmarks. We'll explore how cancer cells hijack normal growth signals to divide without permission, how they build elaborate schemes to evade cell death, the body's built-in quality control, how they sweet-talk nearby blood vessels into feeding them, how they master the art of escape, spreading through the body like a covert operation. We'll look at the Warburg effect and why cancer cells prefer an inefficient energy source. We'll explore the fascinating world of the tumor microenvironment, the ecosystem of cells and molecules that cancer manipulates to its advantage. We'll examine how cancer plays hide-and-seek with the immune system. And we'll investigate the cutting-edge science of cellular plasticity, senescence, and the microbiome's role in cancer. What Hanahan and Weinberg gave us wasn't just a list. It was a new language for understanding cancer, a way to see the patterns beneath the chaos, a framework that shows us that despite cancer's incredible diversity, there are common rules, common strategies that nearly all cancers use. And once you